Okay, it looks like we're all here. I am indeed off the mute button and start things off by thanking everybody for joining early and joining us for our conversation with Alex Norcia today. For those of you who are new here, listening to this on the replay and haven't ever heard of CASA before, we are the Consumer Advocates for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association. We're a small grassroots nonprofit dedicated to promoting smoke-free alternatives to things like cigarettes. You can check out our website at casaa.org. Opportunities to get engaged with lawmakers, rule makers, and the such, and all the information that you and your friends and your loved ones might want or need about tobacco harm reduction and how it can reduce the early death and disease attributed to smoking. So with that, we'll do all the social media stuff when we get back. We have the honor of having Alex Norcia back on a CASA Media channel. You might want to check out an earlier podcast we did with Alex on our podcasts, and you can check all those out on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, etc. But today we want to talk about Alex's most recent article in Filter about some of the spoils of a FOIA request to FDA. So without further ado, Alex, welcome. And I know that you can probably give a much better introduction than what I've done for folks who have never met you or read any of your work. But if you could, a brief introduction, and then we'll get right into talking about the article.
Sure. What's up? You can hear me okay, I imagine?
We can hear you.
All right, fantastic. So in terms of a biographical introduction, I suppose, I am a reporter/editor at Filter, where I mainly cover the tobacco and vape industries, which I've been doing, I guess, for, 4 years at this point.
God help you. Thank you for your sacrifice and continued attention to all of this. So the article we're talking about today, of course, the FDA's early plan to expedite open system vape marketing applications. I guess probably the best way to do this for those who haven't read the article, which you should absolutely go and read the article, maybe set the table for us and give us kind of a summary of what you got back from your FOIA requests and what kind of new. You've also covered this, the kind of the mess that is the PMTA process earlier this year. What more does this add to your reporting?
Yeah, for sure. I would recommend reading the article, mainly because it's much easier to read, I think, than what I'm about to describe. But I guess in terms of the reporting, it almost worked in reverse, right? So the fatal flaw memo came out around the time, I think, when Triton had sued the FDA. And then I sort of worked backwards because there were references and footnotes to earlier memos. So from there, I got what I think they call the PMTA prioritization plan. And in that one, there were also footnotes. So that led me to this open system plan, which is what I just published. And that basically describes what the FDA refers to as a bundling and bracketing approach to looking at applicants that specifically filed a lot of products, a lot of flavors. So, in summary, they basically looked for a maximum of 24, they call them characterizing flavors, and then sort of bracketed them out from there, and would judge them basically on the PG-VG ratio, the highest and lowest, and then also the highest and lowest nicotine levels, meaning if they denied the highest one and they denied the lowest one, I guess logic follows that they then deny all the medium ones, the ones in the middle.
Hearing you describe it like that, it makes it sound even less scientific than, I guess sort of this is. The problem, one of the things that CASA pointed out and others in this space pointed out early on back in 2016 was that FDA was just not and potentially never going to be in a position to handle the tsunami of applications that we ended up seeing. I think we even ended up seeing more than some of us had imagined. And so, it seems like FDA's sort of explanation for all of this is that we needed to find some efficient way of sifting through all of the applications, approving or denying them. But that doesn't really, I mean, I would have loved to seen some open system products get through authorization. But even then, it seems like FDA has kind of abandoned actually doing any kind of real scientific review on these products. Is that kind of the gist that you get from this process they've come up with?
I mean, I'll say two things. One, it's still unclear to me if this is the process they're currently using, because obviously there's still some pending applications. I would assume that's the case, because obviously not everything fell under the sort of fatal flaw standard. And then secondly, it did the way I sort of read it, there was a shred of optimism in it. I mean, maybe it's a little overblown, but I mean, they did seem like they were at least saying they were willing to potentially authorize some open systems. And saying all that, I also think it's obviously a better strategy than what they ended up mainly adopting, which is the fatal flaw standard.
And so, yeah, that was. I'm probably going to end up getting myself confused here, but I think between this recent article and the one that you had written, was it back in May? Um, uh, the sense that we've all got, um, and I know that industry folks have seen this happen right before their eyes, was that it seemed like things were on track. And then Janet Woodcock got pulled in front of a committee in Congress and got a pretty severe tongue lashing, and then things all of a sudden changed. Is there kind of anything in what you've received from your FOIA request, or through your investigation, that sort of confirms that? I mean, other than what we saw, is there anything that shows that this actually was a reaction to being hauled in front of Congress?
I mean, I think at this point, that's the $1 million question. I mean, I've obviously heard that from virtually everybody in the space and the industry, but I've not been able to. It's not like Janet Woodcock or anybody told me that's what's happening. I mean, it seems heavily implied, but I've been trying to confirm it for a very long time. I mean, I guess what I could say is that there clearly was a plan, and then obviously, I mean, I think 9 months maybe went by. I mean, the sort of deadline for them to respond to these applications is approaching, and they took a different strategy. Obviously, not long after she was lambasted by members of Congress. So the short answer to the question is I don't know, but it's definitely not an unlikely scenario.
Yeah. So I know we've got Matt Cully on here too, and Jim McDonald. So before I move on, I want to give them an opportunity to jump in and maybe take the conversation along here a little bit.
Hey, it's Jim. Nice to talk to you again, Alex.
Hey, Jim, what's up?
So I guess my question about this bundling and bracketing approach is, aside from the comment by the author that this would be a way of both denying and approving larger numbers of products or large numbers of products, is there any indication in any of this that they would have approved products and flavors other than tobacco?
Not from this document. No, I mean, admittedly, I'm trying to get more to sort of obviously piece the larger story together, but I figured when I get them, I mean, there's a sort of, I can only embargo them for 30 days. So there's a sort of rush to get them out, because then it's just public record. Anybody can find it. I mean, not that I'm afraid of getting massively scooped on the PMTA process, but I sort of just drill them out when I get them. That being said, I'm trying to work on a larger story that sort of just paints what's occurring. I mean, No one's outright said that they would authorize flavors. But that to me is the closest thing I've read where they seemed, I don't know if optimistic's the right word, willing to do it, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, we got to remember that a lot of the companies that got MDOs for their flavored products still have tobacco flavored products in review.
Right.
So there's lots of open system products still in review that also may not get authorized. I mean, nobody has any idea. There's a pretty good basis for believing the FDA won't approve bottled e-liquids at all. Which
Do we have any idea how many open system flavored products are even left in review? I know, like, for a while there, we were kind of keeping track of it, and then no one's really talked about it for a while. I mean, Jim or Alex or anyone else, do you guys have any idea?
I honestly don't know. Jim might have a better idea.
No, I mean, I never knew of a number anyway. So there's some products that have had their MDOs rescinded or and a phone call comes through. So some of them have been rescinded and some of them are being appealed. But I mean, I don't know, until aside from those products, I don't know how many flavored products there were still in review.
Yeah, I know we never like had like a perfect number, but for a while there, it seems like we were kind of tracking the bigger companies, but it seems like just about all of them have been MDO'd at this point. So it'd be interesting to see what's even left.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's going to tell us.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, since you kind of brought up the fact that there's still some tobacco flavors in review, I just a note. I don't know if there's a question in here. Hopefully, some conversation. But the the criteria that I think it was in this article or it was the previous one, looking at, it was this one. Or no, it was your previous article back in May. In sort of developing this fatal flaw standard, the one of the criteria was, it can't be arbitrary and capricious. We've got to demonstrate that we actually looked at things. And so, knowing that there are tons of manufacturers out there who took FDA at their word that they wouldn't be required to produce longitudinal studies or randomized control trials, I'm assuming that they submitted applications for tobacco flavors without these studies, and yet they may still be in review. And so through this whole process, it seems that the Office of Science or the entire CTP have kind of shot themselves in the foot and put it out there that this whole process is arbitrary. It's based on whether or not it's a flavor we're comfortable with or something we've decided is strictly for kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious at this point that there's clearly a different, whether it's implied or not, standard for tobacco flavored products, and I think literally every other flavor, right?
Yeah, that's the way it seems. It's the way it appears to us as well. I guess so. On maybe a more technical question, for those who are not familiar with this concept of bridging, which was, you've noted, and I know the industry has talked about this a lot. Just to kind of divulge my own confusion over kind of what we had heard years ago about FDA allowing for this, this idea that, perhaps I have it in my head that this is what it is, that manufacturers may be able to kind of talk to each other and, or if you have a product that gains authorization and it has a similar recipe or chemical composition as what you're proposing, you would be able to, instead of going out and paying for all of that science yourself, you would be able to kind of connect with or bridge to what has already been submitted or authorized and just sort of reference that. That was one way I kind of understood it, but reading this the flavor wheel and kind of working within an application, is that bridging limited to within the kind of collection of products that a manufacturer is submitting, or is it more that FDA would be able to say, oh, this is like this other product? We've seen this description, we've seen this research in other applications, and so we can bridge that to another manufacturer's application. Am I just completely confused about all of this, or
no? I think, again, this is just my opinion. I think you needed something to bridge from. So like if you're a massive company, say like Enjoy, right? I'm just using them as an example. I think they likely ran these studies, right? And then they were like, we ran one randomized control trial or whatever. And then this also applies to the other sort of products we have, right? But it doesn't seem the case to me that like if you were one company and another company did this study that you could bridge sort of from company to company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That seems to make more sense to me than what was rattling around in my head.
Sure.
Thanks for helping.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's evident at this point is that you really needed something to like bridge from like something extensive, like an extensive scientific study that would apply to like your sort of nest of products, and it wouldn't necessarily apply to just because this vape acts this way, or we found this data, or we found this toxicology, that could then be applied to a totally different device or unrelated flavor. Does that track?
I think so. Yes. I suffer from not having that inside view that some of our listeners who are actually submitting applications do. So any bit of help I can get to clear that up, I'd very much appreciate it.
I have a related question. If FDA was bridging information from one group of e-liquids made by a certain manufacturer to another group of e-liquids made by that same manufacturer, doesn't that kind of invalidate FDA's assertion that every product needs to have its own individual studies? And how can they generalize information from one flavor to another when the flavors themselves change the tox profile and so forth?
Again, I don't. I'm working on figuring that sort of part out, but I think from what I could gather, it might be even more finite than that, right? So it's like it might not necessarily run one study and then you're able to apply it to menthol, for example. I just don't know how the bridging necessarily works, but I don't think it can be a very long bridge, if that makes sense, right? So it's like it might be, if you have, I don't know, just 3 tobacco flavors of varying nicotine levels or whatever, like there maybe is a bridge between them, right? But like a menthol, that's a different story. You need a menthol bridge. I mean, I'm sort of, this is conjecture, but I think that's probably true.
Well, isn't the problem also that like just the FDA has been really vague and sat on the fence on this one, to where you have certain industry groups that a few years ago did think, because of what the FDA was signaling, and I think even said in some of their meetings, that they could all group together and kind of package like various similar flavors together into one study. But now it sounds more like it's just one company bridges off of a previous product. But it's like they've never really given concrete answers on their bridging.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest problem. Among them, you need a sort of PhD to figure out what they're even ever talking about, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just, that's the massive issue, right? I mean, it was just confusing from the onset.
It's all confusing, and the language they use in their memos is so bizarre too. I mean, who is supposed to understand that? I guess just other FDA employees.
I mean, it's from what I can gather too. I mean, it's written like a sort of drug authorization, right? I mean, and this strategy is used for other things, right? So I mean, it reads like they're authorizing drugs, right? I mean, not whatever you want to call them, recreational products, right?
Right. Now let's remember, when they deal with drugs, those are actually approved, not authorized.
Right.
Because they're safe and effective.
It's always seemed like to me, and this is based off of pure conjecture and not any hard data, it's just a theory that I have, But I've always kind of wondered if, FDA, even with, I feel like this probably happens a bit in the pharmaceutical arena, but especially with vaping, FDA sort of writes these guidelines, but they don't entirely know, they're not experts about the product, even though we would think that they should be. It doesn't seem like they are. And it feels to me like they sort of rely on the actual companies or industry to sort of make sense of it for them. Does that make sense? Like they sort of put something out and they're like, yeah, we think we kind of want this. And then pharma would come in and go, oh, okay, we can do it precisely like this. This is what you wanted, right? And then FDA can go, oh, yes, precisely. That is what we had in mind. Like it feels like they're most comfortable working with, really large corporations that can kind of almost write part of this themselves based on, some suggestion from FDA. Again, that's my feeling, but it kind of tracks if you think about it.
Another thing I'll just add is I've posed this question to people and I've not really gotten an answer. But I mean, obviously, the deadline was moved up so many times because certain public health organizations, or whatever you want to call them, sued the agency, right? So I mean, I am curious if they would have approached all of this differently had they not been in a seeming massive pressurized rush.
I think they would have created their own rush at the end, no matter how long they had. You know what I mean? If they had an extra 2 years, I don't think it would have been better.
Yeah, it's tough to say because I mean they definitely needed some political cover as well, and they didn't have it. So I mean, I think they just go with the wind basically, and at the time of deadline, there were people still freaking out about EVALI and flavors and kids.
Yeah.
But on Danielle's point, I mean, I do remember like years ago, there've been multiple times where FDA has invited vape companies and trade organizations and whatnot to kind of like, even give them suggestions on how they thought the process should work. Now, obviously, FDA didn't take any of that into account, but I do remember them being open to that. Like with it, almost I remember some people saying it seemed like FDA wanted us to kind of create the path for them because they weren't sure. So I think that notion that Danielle has definitely checks out.
Yeah, speaking of folks that you've been talking to, one of the quotes that sort of keeps jumping out at me, no matter who is covering this, is speaking to people at FDA who want to remain anonymous. I'm sure for professional reasons that's fine, but at least the reason given in this article to you was because this person was worried about their future in tobacco control. That being the case, I mean, do you think that you're getting honest and candid answers from folks at CTP when you poke around?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's sort of hard to. I can't say who some of these people are, obviously, but I think a lot of them had worked there and don't work there anymore. Those people tend to be easier to get to speak, even if it's anonymously. But yeah, I don't think anybody's lying to me. Otherwise, there's almost no reason to talk to me otherwise, right? I mean, I do get this sense. I mean, and I think it's obvious that people are frustrated with, say, the bureaucracy and kind of what's unfolded. I mean, I don't know how much certain people could have done to have alleviated that pressure, but yeah.
Is there any NDA or anything like that they have to sign when they leave? Like, for example, like does Matt Holman have to be muzzled for like 5 years before he speaks on this, or like
he's got certain, I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, but he has certain like ethics restrictions, right? So I mean, he can't be involved in product decisions that like he had handled while he was at the agency. I don't think he can directly engage the agency for a certain amount of time. I mean, it's not that long. It's it's a couple years, if it's even that long. But I don't know what, if anything, he had to sign on his way out the door, for example.
I don't think government agencies have NDAs per se. I don't think they can muzzle people in private communication or in that
I mean,
sense.
yeah, and I mean he's clearly talking to
Yeah.
reporters. I'll say that much.
Yeah, but he obviously doesn't want to like blow the FDA up, especially when the company he's working for is going to have to deal with them in the future.
100%.
But
Yeah.
but I would obviously he's the one guy where you would love to hear his opinion on these various changes in the memos and everything.
I do think. I mean, personally, I do think he'll end up speaking more than he ever had, obviously, but he's still going to be, under the sort of umbrella of PMI, right? It's not just going to be like some citizen going out there. But I am optimistic he'll say more positive things. I mean, that's not necessarily going to be great for small businesses, but I think he'll be maybe a little more vocal about the continuum of risk, say.
Yeah, I mean it would still be a benefit to small businesses to have somebody leaving the FDA and speaking, from a THR centric point of view.
Yeah, speaking of, I guess, high-profile people leaving organizations, I think it was last week. I know AVM tweeted it out. I don't know how far and wide the public information is, but yet another high-ranking person at the Truth Initiative has decided to leave. Have you been able to follow up with this person or get them to talk to you about what their plans are and why they would be leaving Truth Initiative?
No, but I've thought about it, and then I've heard. I don't want to start throwing rumors around, but it might not necessarily be because he sort of had a moral stance. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, what I don't know that is there any kind of preview you can give us as to where the threads you're pulling and the footnotes here are going? What can we look forward to next?
Well, I mean, I think mainly at this point, I want to put together something that we sort of call it a TikTok, right? It's sort of a chronology of what happened. I mean, I'm most curious in if they had a different plan in the beginning, which it does seem to be. At least they had a different approach, and then why it was blown up, whether it was Woodcock, whether it was some other reason, just sort of piecing it all together in the sense that it's, I guess, sort of comprehensive. Because right now I have these articles, but they're all sort of, stray parts at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone here can answer it, but I do wonder, just as a point of like commentary, if any of the documents that you're able to, have made public through these FOIA requests would be at all helpful to any of the companies, currently in litigation with FDA or undergoing appeals or anything like that. Like, I wonder if any of this sort of stuff, or if it, if you ever think about that, if this would be able to, help or not any of these appeals and stuff.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I mean, I obviously, I make them public myself, so anybody can use them as they will. I mean, I saw Eric Heyer, one of the lawyers representing a lot of these people, sort of complaining that it wasn't in the administrative record. I mean, I don't know how helpful that can necessarily be. I mean, in part because it's sort of convoluted appeals laws, and I don't fully understand it. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it helps out in some capacity. I mean, another perhaps obvious threat of all this is these FOIAs take forever, right? So, I mean, I think I filed that one probably 4 months ago. And then one day you just wake up and they're just in, it's just in your email and you don't even know what it's going to be. I mean, it could be like redacted to hell, right? This one just happened not to be.
What are your thoughts on like where other reporters are at? Like, what do you think? It seems like we had Mark Gunther on a few weeks ago. He seemed fairly optimistic about reporters starting to as optimistic as Mark Gunther can be, to like, they're more open to, like, I think the Juul thing changed it a little bit, is what I guess is what I'm
I
getting
think
at.
that's exactly
And
true.
so, like, do you think that that's just kind of perked up ears and, like, it kind of made it more real for some of these reporters and now they're actually willing to dig? Or is it just kind of like we've had this in the past where, like, all of a sudden you were part of it, like, remember
Yes.
back at, like, 2018, 2019, you started to see a few reporters say, like, wait a second, let's dig deeper into this. And then, we kind of got our hopes up, but then COVID hit, and then we didn't see anything about vaping, and now we're starting to see reporters touching it again.
I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to say. I mean, in part, I guess I'm lucky in the sense that, like, I do work for a relatively niche publication, right? Like, I'm able to, it's hard to imagine the New York Times writing some long thing about, the open system memo, for example, right? So I have that going for me. But generally speaking, yeah, I think the Juul thing sort of took people aback, whether or not the media or members of the media were complicit in sort of their downfall to begin with is, say what you will. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like, tonally, it just seems like it's not as big of a deal anymore. Even this disposable stuff, I don't know, like, what it is, but it just seems like people aren't freaking out as much as they used to. But maybe I'm just imagining that.
It's hard to maintain a moral panic.
Yeah, I think people get desensitized, and just like with other substances in the past, it's like anytime there's something new, there's all this fear and panic. But it can last for decades, as we saw with marijuana and other things. But it does seem like people just don't care as much. They're not as outraged and freaked out about it. There's bigger fish to fry, type of thing. And when we are seeing vaping articles, not all, but I've definitely noticed more balanced vaping articles over the last few months.
Yeah, and I think it helps too. It's hard for me to even remember, but, like, I don't know, take somebody like Cliff Douglas, right? I don't think he was saying the sort of things he's saying now 3 or 4 years ago, right? It seems like this contingent, the contingent I'm describing is obviously, like, scholars and scientists and academic types who are willing to go out on a limb and sort of critique, the lunacy that's going on, right? And I think, that can only help, obviously, right?
Yeah, for sure. And what a lot of vaping advocates have said for years is, like, you almost need shit to get really, really bad for people to care.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you need people, maybe a couple viral videos where somebody's getting arrested or something crazy like a Juul ban, which is, it's so funny because it's like mainstream media, has been reporting that various politicians and health groups have been calling for a Juul ban for years. But then all of a sudden, when it happened, they acted shocked by it.
Yeah, then the other thing is no one knows what the hell's going on, right? Like, you just try to explain this to somebody, even friends of mine who use Juul, for example, and then it's like, wait, why is it banned? And then you're like, okay, well, then you have to explain the whole PMTA process. And then a week later, it's reversed. Okay, can I buy them now? What does it mean? Why was it denied initially? You don't know why it was really denied initially. What's going to happen now? You don't really know. It's in the FDA sort of not transparent bureaucracy. Okay, what happens next? How long does that take? And, like, no one. And then by the time another decision comes around, everyone's forgotten it was banned to begin with.
Yeah, I've seen so many bad takes just from ordinary people on social media about the Juul ban. You've got a lot of, half the people are saying, well, why are they banning Juul and nothing else? You've got to say,
yeah, they have no idea.
No, they've already banned 99% of everything. But
well, as a consumer, though, think how confusing that is. Like, Juul has been, they hear, all these headlines about Juul being banned, but then they walk into the bodega and see, like, a cotton candy disposable or something. So it's like they it's confusing enough for people like us. But think of how it is for your average consumer trying to even wrap their head around how the FDA even works when it comes to a product like this.
And I don't think nicotine users, certainly smokers, but vapors, we know a lot of vapors who are involved, but most vapors are not. they don't pay attention to this stuff. When I smoked, I didn't know anything about what was going on with, you know, people fighting against the tobacco companies and, you know, all the stuff in the 80s and 90s. I didn't know anything about that. I knew taxes went up when the price of cigarettes went up by $1. But I don't think most people who use the substance care about any of this stuff, and they shouldn't have to, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just endlessly confusing. I mean, even with lowering the nicotine levels in cigarettes, for example, right? You know, the number of texts I got where it's like, we can't smoke anymore, and it's like, this is going to take a decade, right? And like, it might not even go into effect, right? But it's like a breaking news alert from a Washington Post or whatever, and it's like, it's not, and everyone's going to forget about it again, and then, you know, in 5 years there might be a little bit of movement, but it's a whole, like, you know, it's such a convoluted space with so many different stakeholders, that I think you really have to be following it pretty closely to have any sort of, you know, semblance of what the hell's going on.
For sure. And I've tried to explain this to some friends, and it's just they have no clue what I'm saying. You know, it's like, well, technically the product you're using is illegal, but it's not illegal that for you to use it. It's just illegal for them to sell it. Oh yeah, then why aren't cops rolling into these C stores and stuff? Well, because FDA, you know, has enforcement discretion, and they kind of pick and choose. Like they just obviously most people when they look at laws, it's kind of a black and white thing, but there's
Yeah,
just
100%.
so much gray when it comes to FDA that people are like, wait, this is how our country operates.
And I think I've seen even a fundamental misunderstanding of how FDA regulates, like foods, for example. I don't know if anybody saw this, but there was this controversy going on online where some influencer sold some sauce. I think it was called like pink sauce or something. And someone asked her, you know, on a live stream, like, oh, is your sauce, you know, FDA approved? And she looked at, you know, the camera and was like, FDA approved? No, of course not. Like, it's not for, a medicinal treatment or anything. It's not therapeutic. And then the internet, you know, roasted her basically, like the F in FDA was trending on Twitter because people were like, well, of course the FDA, you know, authorizes food and stuff. But it's like, I'm sorry, are you under the impression that the FDA like inspects every frozen burrito or yogurt cup that exists in the world? Like, of course, you know, food is under their purview, but it's not actually, you know, it's not being every single item inspected, or this is the honor system for a lot of the, you know, for dietary supplements, for food, even for a lot of cosmetics. Like people fundamentally do not understand how much of, you know, what the FDA does outside of pharmaceuticals is actually just like they put rules out and then sort of hope that everyone follows them and then bring the hammer down if there's a problem. You know what I mean?
And that's the way vaping and nicotine products are regulated in the EU or in most EU countries. In the UK, for example, the manufacturer notifies the government agency that a new product is coming out, and then if there are problems with it, they're reported, and the agency can take action.
So all this talk about the confusion over not just the vaping regulations, but what does FDA do in general? I'm sort of curious, Alex, if you know. I don't know if any of us have ever followed anything like this review that Calif has commissioned, but all this stuff that we're talking about and all the things that you're reporting on. How much does anyone think that this is going to factor into whatever conclusions like that the Reagan-Udall Foundation will come to in their review?
Yeah, I mean, so I think you typically hear, I mean, I have typically heard two things, right? The first group is basically like, this is great. This is actual oversight. I'm optimistic there'll be change. This is like a legitimate thing. I mean, I'm curious to see who they end up choosing to sort of be on this committee, right? And then the other group is basically like, this is a PR stunt. It's all bullshit. It's a complete waste of time. Nothing's gonna change.
I'm in the group that thinks that Calif wants the answer that the FDA is underfunded. That's what this is. I think that that's what the purpose of this is just to show, the country and legislators, hey, look, this third party group took a look at us. They said that we're underfunded. We can't, that's why we are having a hard time. We need more money. But
And also, Dick Durbin yells at us too much.
yeah.
I mean, I think that Caliph wouldn't have asked for it if it was going to be critical of Caliph.
Yeah, though he did have to do something, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been hammered pretty hard about a lot of stuff. I mean, I would think if you ask any average person's opinion of the FDA or even the CDC, I wouldn't think it'd be a good one.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
and
yeah.
this is the issue of the public trust of these agencies, which has been eroded so heavily over. I mean, I think it was, even before we got into the pandemic, not many people had a high opinion of these agencies, but it seems, and this is it's not exclusive to tobacco. And personally, I would think that would weigh heavily on anybody looking at, the scientific communication. Science comms is important, and if the agency isn't able to do it properly, I do imagine there's a dollar amount attached to that, but I figured that would maybe bring someone to the conclusion that there may need to be even some sort of cultural change at FDA.
Yeah, I will say I think they're the worst at is comms, just getting information out there that makes sense to a layman, basically.
I don't think they release any information until about 18 lawyers have vetted it. So everything they say looks like it's been, carefully studied by legal minds before they dare put it out. Do you think, Alex, that Caliph will select an Office of Science director for the CTP who will be similar to the director of the CTP that he chose, Brian King?
I don't know. That's tough to say. I mean, I think people were, as much as I think people they're all upset about this process. There's also this like massive respect for Holman, right? I mean, in the same way that like Zeller left, everyone hated Zeller, and then King comes in, and it's like, well, okay, maybe Zeller wasn't that bad after all. I don't know. I mean, I've not heard any whispers of them replacing him yet. I imagine the process takes a long time, but I'm very curious to see if it's who it is. It might just be a scientist we've never heard of, right? I don't know.
They have a public, job search thing out for it now. So
I saw that actually. Yeah.
I mean, you would think that they would just replace him with somebody from inside the Office of Science.
I would imagine that so. That would be if I were a guessing man. That's what I would guess. Yeah.
But who would have thought that they'd bring in Brian King to be the director of the center?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I didn't.
Yeah.
So speaking of Brian King, I don't know that we've seen, certainly we haven't heard a whole lot from him. I think I've only seen one announcement. I think that came out, was it in the past couple weeks? I honestly can't even remember what it was about. It sounded like the usual fare from FDA, but in people that you've talked to, have you been able to discuss with them what's it like working for the new CTP director? Are there sweeping changes coming through, or is he just trying to get his sea legs?
I don't.
I think we lost Alex. Can you still hear us?
Come back, Alex.
But at the same time, I think these people, I think their hands are so tied by the bureaucracy that like a single person can't just come in and like wreck train. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you cut out there a little bit. I don't know if we got.
I was just saying. I think it's easy to freak out, right, because of King's past statements about Evalier. whatever. But at the same time, I'm sort of under the impression that a single person can't really go in there and sort of, do whatever they want and make sort of massive changes.
Right. Probably the first or second guy could have done that, but by now
Exactly.
it's such an entrenched bureaucracy that's
Yeah, double-edged sword of bureaucracy, right? It can't change, but it can't change.
Exactly.
right.
So I seem to be at the end of my questions. I don't know if Matt or Danielle or Jim kind of are able to pick up the ball here. But I feel like I've gone through my list, and I don't know, Alex, is there anything in particular that maybe we haven't discussed well enough on what you've recently reported, or maybe some things from the past that are more relevant now?
I don't know. It's hard off the top of my head. I mean, if anybody's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I mean, just in terms of things I'm focusing on, I'm curious to see what happens with, disposables and synthetic nicotine. I just read this Reuters story about it, for example. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously the remaining applications that are still, quote unquote, pending.
Am I remembering this correctly? But wasn't there some sort of deadline? I don't know if it was self-imposed by the FDA or not. Somewhere around June, where they, sort of stated that they'd have a decision on the rest of the PMTAs. Am I making that up, or was that something?
You're not. Generally, you're not making it up. I don't remember what the dates are, but they have to basically give reports to that judge in Maryland. They're like quarterly reports, I think. So they're progress reports, right? So at some point, I think it's soonish. It might be in September. Don't quote me on that, but they have to say like where they're at. I don't think they're going to be, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think they said they were going to be done until the following June. So like June 2020.
So
Didn't they say like one company hadn't, they weren't going to get an answer to like 2005 or something? Wasn't that a story?
Yeah, that was from one of the court cases. I mean, there's so many things going on I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, that was from one of the appeals courts, I think.
it was a report to that particular circuit court about the FDA's internal appeal.
Yeah, but you are right about the 2025, Matt. It was some absurd date in the future. Yeah.
So to update a little on that report to Judge Grimm, it was due on July 30th.
Okay.
And they submitted the status report on July 28th that just totally ignored what they had said before. What they had said before was that by the end of June, they would have 50% of the covered applications settled. And in the July 28th thing, they say, yep, we completed that. But they haven't taken any actions, to my knowledge, aside from the jewel ban, between the two reports. So what I've decided from this is that they're referring to things that they had already settled previously. When they said they had 240 covered applications to deal with still, they must have meant we had 240 applications to begin with, not still to go. I don't know. So anyway, they did report to the judge. And the next report will be due July, August, September, October 26th.
I'm honestly surprised that we haven't seen another lawsuit from, Campaign and Truth and the whole, what does Alex call them, the funky bunch? All of them sort of pressuring again just because this has obviously taken so long.
So Matt Myers and the body parts.
I don't think they would need to file another lawsuit. They would just need to go to the judge on this existing one and ask him to modify his order to do whatever they want done.
I just don't know how much more they could possibly get at this point. I mean, they've moved the deadline. They're getting progress reports. I mean, at the end of the day, the FDA either does what they say they're going to do, or they need more time, obviously, right? I mean, it's out of these people's hands, no matter how much they want it to be in their hands, you know?
And they got their jewel ban, even though it fell apart in a couple days.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how much more they think they can achieve through the courts, and I at the risk of veering into conspiracy theory territory here, I'm sort of curious whether it makes sense to think along the lines of, if FDA makes a big enough mess of this, it sort of gives the Matt Myers and the body parts groups a little bit more ammo at the state and local levels, where we can see actual law enforcement agents, within those jurisdictions able to take action, more forceful and immediate action than FDA. So I kind of have to wonder, there is a certain level of confusion and even incompetence we would expect at a massive bureaucratic agency. But I'm left to wonder whether or not some of that is strategic. I told you it was going to be conspiracy theory territory, so I'll just leave it at that.
So related to Alex Clark's comment there, Alex Norcia, you could just replace that term public health groups with body parts groups. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll see what I can. That one might be out of my hands, but I'll see what I can do.
Well, happy to help. Well, with that, I don't know if there's anything else. Feel free to interrupt me here. But I know your time is precious, Alex, and I want to let you get back to your good work here. And so, unless there are any other burning questions or statements that need to be made, I'll start the wrap up here. All right, hearing none. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us today on our Twitter chat with Alex Norcia. And if you haven't read the article already, definitely go and check it out as soon as my window is going to start scrolling here. The title, of course, is The FDA's Early Plan to Expedite Open System Vape Marketing Applications by Alex Norcia on filtermag.org. And of course, follow all of Alex's reporting through Filter. Are you still writing occasionally for Vice or some other outlets?
Yeah, I'm still doing freelance stuff, though. Admittedly, it's not going to be even remotely about vaping, because I need a break every once in a while. But yeah, I should have some other stuff out soon that's unrelated. But I'll just tweet it out as always.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Follow Alex on Twitter. And speaking of the Twitters and Instagrams, you can follow CASA at CASA Media on Twitter and Instagram. We also post all of these Twitter Spaces and our podcasts on our YouTube channel. It's just CASA. And we have a Spotify. We have a SoundCloud. And of course, for all of the other information that you need to know about CASA, about tobacco harm reduction, please visit casaa.org. While you're there, we do sell t-shirts and other merchy type items. So advocate in style, go pick yourself up a t-shirt. It's not a massive fundraiser for us. We do get a little bit, but mostly it's about getting the message out there. And Danielle Jones put together some amazing designs for all of our swag, and encourage everybody to go and visit our store. And on all of those notes, a bit of a programming note. We will not have a Twitter Space in 2 weeks. I believe that's still August. We're going to take the rest of August off, and all of these CASA Media broadcasts and so on will come back starting, I believe, on September 10th, if that date changes. Certainly you're all following us on Twitter, so we'll put any notices up there. So with that, everybody, enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you again, Alex, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm sure we will have you back on probably soon to discuss more of your findings at FDA and other goings on at the people who want to keep us smoking. And so, with that, thanks to all the panelists, Matt, Jim, Danielle, thanks, board members, for joining in and contributing to the conversation. And all of you, once again, thanks for joining and listening. And we'll see you back here in September. Bye-bye.